What is going on? We are, we are having a great show tonight. We have our friends from DealMachine in the house today. We have Matt Kemp and Josh Johnson. Is Joshua or Josh?
Josh is good. Some people do Joshua,
Okay.
but
And my partner in crime, Yoav.
What's
What's
going
up?
on? What's going on? What's going on, everybody? Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Matt, for showing.
That's awesome. So I think we have a nice milestone today. We just reached exactly 900 members in our Facebook group. So
that's
that's
awesome.
that's nice. And just to give you guys, Matt and Josh, kind of an idea of who is the group here. Again, we are virtual wholesalers based in Israel. So most of the people live in Israel doing virtual wholesaling from Israel without being present on the ground. So we want to talk today about how to leverage your app, your system, the DealMachine, and do it from overseas because we know we have few students that already doing it, but we want to kind of hear you have a bigger sample size to speak with more investors, and we kind of want to know from the inside, what do you guys see work in today's market, kind of maybe tricks and tips that you can give our guys to put them in a position to be successful and close some deals. So that's kind of the goal for tonight. So before we start, we want to make it an interactive session today. So guys, if you have questions, make sure you start to put the questions in the chat. We're gonna put it on the screen because we want to make sure we use Matt and Josh to the best of our ability to make sure they give us the most value possible, because at the end of the day, they want to make sure we use the application and be successful with it, and we let others know about it. So without further ado, Josh and Matt, maybe you can share with us kind of how did you start this application? Because I remember back in the day, I used to do driving for dollars, and again, not in a very efficient way. So
Yeah.
and this changed the game. So can you talk about how this system and how you started this program?
Yeah, I'll start, and Matt will definitely have stuff to add to it. We started about 2017, and the real thing was David, our CEO, our original founder, was essentially trying to hunt down his own deals, and everyone was like, "Hey, you need to go driving for dollars. It's the best way to get deals." He was trying to find stuff on market, no luck. It just stuff didn't fit the number to make sense for a deal, and so he started driving for dollars. Realized there were really good leads that were coming out of it, but it was a cumbersome process. It took a lot of time. It took a lot of different resources of data research, notepads, trying to find mailhouse or manually write letters. And so it was just a lot of work. And so we built DealMachine to streamline that process, originally exclusively for David himself. He built a very quick version of it in a weekend. It didn't have a lot of bells and whistles, but just logged the information. And over time, we gradually started building more of it. We started selling DealMachine as an actual product a few months after that. And based off user feedback, have just tried to engineer DealMachine from the get-go to make the process of driving easier, because it's always worked. Finding rundown distressed real estate and saying, hey, whoever owns this doesn't care about it right now and probably is willing to sell it at a discount. It has always worked. It's just been hard. It's been a big lift. And so our goal has always been, how do we make that easier along the way when it comes from identifying the properties, finding the ownership information, and then doing the actual marketing to those properties. And so that's how we started. Over time, we've grown a lot. We've added like a list building feature as well, which is a more traditional way just to build target lists of properties based off the data that we have. And then we've just added more features to help make the process easier. So that brings us to where we are today, which is just continuing to innovate and make that process as easy as possible.
Yeah. And just to echo Josh a little bit too, one, thank you so much for having us on. Excited to be able to be a resource here for the community. I already see people throwing great questions in the chat here. So I'm excited that it'll be an interactive discussion there. But yeah, like Josh said, I mean, David was essentially scratching his own itch. It was something that, the process of driving for dollars has been around for decades, right? It's just now bringing technology to do that and doing things like, virtual driving for dollars and bringing innovation that way to be able to make it just easier, more effective, and possible for other people to leverage it all over the world. So excited to be able to bring that. And thanks again for having us on today.
Awesome. Great having you guys.
It's good to be. And thanks for re-hitting on the virtual element, because I've actually had a lot of calls with wholesalers from Israel actually over the last few years who have used DealMachine to get deals, both with physical on the ground teams, with our virtual product that we'll talk a little bit about. So thanks again for reminding me to even mention the virtual stuff, because there's ways to do this, as you guys all know, overseas.
For sure. And this is definitely one of the points we would like to discuss as well, going through our conversation, but talking again about the virtual concept, the virtual driving for dollars concept, and the actual driving for dollar concept. That we'll get to it as we go.
Yeah, absolutely. And also before we start, I just want to also mention Roy Kamhi, who is a member of the group. He's one of our students who kind of put everything together. He's one of your biggest fans. He has used your program for over a year. He closed multiple deals from Israel without leaving his apartment in Tel Aviv, without being for one time in St. Louis. He's been closing deals. So
he's doing hell of a work with you guys. Yeah. It's amazing what he does with you guys.
Yeah, he's in my backyard. I'm based in St. Louis here, and he's closing deals from across the world. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And Josh, are you based in Indianapolis, or are you also in St. Louis?
Yeah, it's a great question. I kind of live all over, at least for the last few months. I bounce between Indianapolis, Chicago, and Raleigh right now. Raleigh is kind of home base most likely, or most frequently, I guess. But I try to spend a lot of time in our home office, which is Indianapolis. And then me, David, Dave, the other co-founder, and Matt all grew up in St. Louis originally. So definitely in St. Louis occasionally as well.
Awesome. So I guess, again, we can hit it again. We kind of start to answer questions, but I want to kind of put it together in the strategy first, because I know at least there's two main ways to do it. Again, we teach our students to hire drivers on the ground and kind of have them drive for dollars and with the app. And also there's the virtual way to hire virtual assistants, so do it yourself. From what you guys see on your end, what do you see most people see the most success with, the drivers on the ground or with the VA?
Yep. So I definitely view the physical on the ground driving for dollars as a more productive, a higher ROI activity. It's one of those things in the end, you're going to have ROI on both. You're going to come across those most unique deals that are those really big home runs with physical driving for dollars is what we see most frequently. Whereas you're still going to get opportunity from virtual driving for dollars. The virtual issues come into play really. Google Maps only updates their visual pictures every so often. Sometimes it's as much as a few years out of date. And so you're not getting that most up-to-date view of what this property looks like today. Maybe that owner started taking care of it. Maybe they sold it. And we do have the sale data to tell you if the sale date was after the photo that you're looking at in Google Maps. But there's just the immediacy and accurate of the current condition of the property isn't always viewable on Google Maps like it is when you're physically in person driving for dollars. Again, that being said, if it's a matter of hiring a driver, not doing driving or doing virtual driving, let's do virtual driving over not doing it at all. But if you can complement your virtual driving with the physical in person doing that driving for dollars, that's extremely valuable to be able to get that. So I think one of my favorite examples is one of David's second or third deals with DealMachine was a house that actually there was a storm in Indianapolis for about a month after a tree had fallen through the roof of this house. And it was like, clearly there was like water going inside, big issue for the property, but no one had addressed it. And so that was a really recent thing that happened, that because you're actively physically driving for dollars, we saw that right away. And it was never going to get to the point where it was going to hit Google Maps. And so those are the types of deals that you're going to find, those really recent opportunities that pop up with physical distress when you're doing that physical driving.
Yeah, I'd say just to add on a little bit there too as well. I know on the physical driving side, and because of that, I know Josh, you were very instrumental in kind of how we've evolved the product over time to really be able to manage those drivers and really focus on, hey, yeah, you can do the virtual, and we want to give you a suite of tools to be able to build your own fleet of physical drivers getting out, within a particular market. And I know, Josh, that was kind of the part of your vision on the product evolving side of it. But
yeah,
sure.
Understanding that there is pros and cons for each method or strategy that you use, but I completely agree that I understand that the main advantage of hiring physical drivers is having the ability to be on spot, like to be updated right immediately on things, contrary to, like you mentioned, I mean, between Google Maps updating their pictures once in a year or two, a lot of things can happen within that time, right? So this is where you get it. The other way around is that you actually need to maintain and to manage and to hire constantly drivers, but it has disadvantages and advantages, which are clear to us. The advantages, yeah,
absolutely, yeah. It's definitely a higher lift to run that physical team than it is to just do it virtually.
For sure. So from what you've seen, what's the best payment structure that you see working with drivers? Again, there is the hourly option and there is the per property option. What do you see most user use, and that more importantly, see more success with?
Yep. It's a good question. And it's probably the question that over the years I've gotten the most when we start working with people. I have seen all three different models work together, where you pay once a deal comes in, and you kind of pay more like a bird dog fee to somebody, where you pay like $1 to $2 per lead that they send to you that's qualified, or you just pay an hourly. If you can budget for it, hourly will most often be the cheapest, most likely route for you to go on the long term, if you can budget for it up front, and it will give you the consistency that the other models will always. I don't want to say, again, I've seen them all work. It's just a matter of, you're going to have, if you're recruiting and paying people in the back end, you're going to have to re-recruit people over and over versus having like a smaller team of 3 to 5 drivers that produce enough leads for you to get your deal flow. And so my optimum option is to go for an hourly driver or two who are doing 20 hours a week and can commit to that focus and say, I'm going to drive my 20 hours a week, and you're going to get your 20 hours worth of leads from that week from driving for dollars. And so again, the key part there is being able to budget for it. If you can't budget for it long term, I would repivot and go to the route of paying people on the back end and trying to approach it like, hey, I have to recruit 50 drivers to get the volume of properties I need versus just recruiting 3 or 4. And then you're kind of also playing more of like a mentorship, long-term, get excited about real estate game for that driver, because more than likely because they're viewing it as a back-end payment, they're probably someone who's entrepreneurial, more willing to share in the upside and take some risk on the front end. And so your messaging and how you talk to and recruit those types of drivers has to change. And so it's just realizing the one that you're going for and then optimizing your processes to recruit those types of drivers.
It's a very important point. Very important point. Identifying again who is the character we're aiming to recruit, and then sending a message out on our post and ads accordingly. That's very important.
Absolutely. Just like anything. I mean, it's not sales and marketing, but it's similar. It's like you want to have alignment of the person you're talking to with what action you need to take, and so making sure you're aligned on that is really, really key.
100%. And as far as KPI, again, if you're going the hourly route, again, without going big KPI, as far as how many properties we should expect from a driver to make sure they produce if we go with the hourly rate?
Yep, there's going to be some variance based off of the areas you're asking them to drive. Obviously, if they're driving $500,000 home areas, which wouldn't necessarily be my full recommendation, but you're going to average more like in the 12 to 15 properties an hour range if they're driving really nice neighborhoods. The ideal cadence for me is also going to come down to another variable of, are you having them take original photos of the property or not? Because they can move a lot faster if they aren't taking those original photos. However, if you're going to be using, for instance, our direct mail, where you have that original live photo that we use on the mail that we send on your behalf, or it also gives you verification that, hey, they added a property that makes sense for my marketing criteria,
Qualified.
that are qualified. And so if they're taking photos of every property that are qualified, you're probably going to be looking at 20 to 25 properties an hour on the high side. 25 would be pretty high. I've done as much as like 35 or 40, but that's more unique. If you look at averages, 20 to 25. If they're using our tap to add module, which is just tap the property and it's in the system and move on to the next one, and they don't take the photo, you could probably expect anywhere from 35 up to 45 properties per hour of drive time. And so if you're doing SMS, if you're doing cold calling, and you have a high level of trust of that driver on the ground, I always focus on that tap to add mode. Whereas if you are going to be using our direct mail, which is obviously a great passive form of marketing, I would maybe split in and get some of those photos as well.
But again, being able to use the tap to add means that you need also your driver. You need confidence in your driver, right? That you understand the what exactly you're looking for. Maybe more experienced one. After some time, you get confident with him, and then you will allow him to start going faster. Right?
That is the perfect way to look at it. Is I oftentimes coach people, hey, like those first 2-3 weeks that you have a driver, have them go out, take photos of every property, sit down with them, audit with them, and say, hey, like, let's look at the properties you added. Here's what I liked. Here's what I didn't like. Coach them up a little bit. As your confidence threshold is higher, ask them to you can pull back on the photo element so they can add more properties per hour. But 100%, Yoav, you've got to have some level of confidence in them, or else they could be adding anything.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's talk about, again, we have drivers, we know how to pay them, they start to generate prospects. And now the big question, what's the best sequence to do? Do we cold call them? Do we mail them? Do we send them a voice blast? And maybe all of the above. So what do you see been working for other clients, and what do you recommend for somebody who's starting as far as to market to these prospects?
Yep. To your point, obviously the ideal world is you're using all of those channels appropriately. But as you look at budgets, you definitely don't want to spread yourself thin if you can't afford to do all of them to all of the different properties. And so I would evaluate also how much time you have. Are you going to personally be doing the cold calling? Is someone else going to be doing the cold calling on your behalf? If you don't have the capacity to do the cold calling, I would really focus in and hone into direct mail. The biggest thing I'll say with direct mail, it's a matter of repetition. It's not, hey, I added 1,000 properties, I sent mail, I only got 5 calls and no deals, what's going on? It's a matter of consistency and repetition on that. And so hitting them with at least a piece of mail every 30 days, 7 to 12 times is the ideal total range of those number of touch points. The reality is some people will get the first postcard, call, and get a deal. I know people who literally, we have someone we're doing a webinar with tonight. They got a $50,000 deal in their free trial because they added a property, sent a postcard day one, and they had a $50,000 deal from it. But that doesn't happen every time. Some of my deals have come on the 7th, 8th, or 9th postcards. And so it's just a matter of repetition with direct mail. And so the biggest thing I'll say on direct mail, if you're going to go don't do it if you're only going to experiment with one mail piece like per property. Plan for at least hitting that 6-7 range budgeting wise. And then every 30 days, I think, is a good cadence to follow.
Mm-hmm.
in terms of optimizing that cadence in DealMachine, we also have a few different mail types. We've got a ballpoint pen letter, we've got standard 4x6 postcards, and recently we released 6x9 and 6x11 size postcards as well. And so those are bigger pieces of mail that get in their inbox and get a little better attention. And so I would recommend just doing one of each, so that you actually can kind of experiment, and people are going to respond to different types of mail based off of their own personalities.
Yes. I mean, in the end, I know a combination of kind of that short-term feedback loop to that quicker marketing, like Josh said, of the skip trace, call, with a follow up by that call, text, email, even door knock, something like that, having that faster feedback loop to see if they're a motivated seller, in addition to that long-term nurture. Those two together are the combination that we're seeing with that continuous follow-up of where those deals are coming from for our DealMachine members.
Got it.
Josh, do you have any feedback on KPIs for direct mail, which is going out response rate wise? I mean, usually what you guys experience or your clients are experience when sending out mail. It will be awesome if you share with us.
Yeah, it's going to vary a little piece to piece. On the overall average, about 0.8 to 1% is going to be a good response rate. I see the ballpoint pen letters that we do and the bigger postcards. The ballpoint pen letters I've directly tested out, and they had more like a 1.2, 1.3% response rate. The bigger postcards I've started personally testing those. I've heard good feedback that we've seen a higher response rate to those as well. I don't have like a hard number for you. My guess it would be around the 1% range for those bigger 6x9, 6x11 type mail pieces. And so that's roughly what you're looking at. So like every 1,000 out, about 10 callbacks is roughly what I would suggest.
Yeah, and which is a pretty much good response rate, because when talking, broadly on direct mail as a benchmark for the whole industry, we're talking about, 0.5, 0.6% average rate. So you're talking about here 0.8 to 1%, 1.2%. Those niche lists are actually will allow to produce almost double the response rate from a normal direct mail campaign, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, exactly to your point, going back to why we're doing this heavy lift of driving for dollars. Niche matters so much. Yeah. We know I could give you a list of every absentee owner in every city in the country, and you could market to it like crazy. You're probably going to lose money based off your marketing to do it without getting more niche and more focused. And that's why we do this extra effort of driving, because it gets us to that list of properties that no one else is marketing to at the volume that we're marketing to them at, and no one else is as focused on it.
And the timing, right? And the timing, this is so crucial, because you have a combination of a couple of things. One, you have a targeted list of people who are actually having what we call distressed properties. But what plays a major role when having a physical drivers, it's not only targeting that list, but also having it in the right timing. Like you mentioned, I mean, a tree fall down on the house or something happens, you're up to date on what's going on at the present, which it does give you an advantage.
Exactly. One other thing I'll point out about having a physical driver too, whether or not you take them all the way to the level of having them actually door knock the property, or just have door hangers on hand with them so that they can drop a door hanger on. That's another way to establish those touch points with people right away, having a direct response before you even then take it to the rest of the marketing process.
That's amazing. Maybe you can even share, I mean, those are like nuggets that maybe you can share with us and with the group, what, those small things that can make you, if you're sending out a driver anyway, what is the extra things you can do? Like you just mentioned, there's anything that you see that your clients are doing that are being successful with them?
I think the biggest thing are those two things. Like our elite members oftentimes they enable some of their drivers, especially for some of the drivers that maybe are almost an acquisition manager path as well. They will enable those drivers to have a quick script on hand. It's like, hey, if you see something that's not just a little bit distressed, but one of the more distressed properties, go ahead and door knock it. Here's 5 quick questions to qualify it. The same things that you might give a cold caller to qualify. And then the end result is, hey, it sounds like if you really are interested in selling, let's schedule a call with the appropriate person on your team. And so they're doing that. And it's a very lightweight way of enabling someone to have a very quick conversation. You motivate them and say, hey, we'll pay you $50 for every one of those appointments that are set. So they're motivated to do it. and then you're easily going to get ROI on that process by allowing them to do that. And so that door knocking effort, or again, the door hanger. And I've seen, even if I've got these formal, the same process I follow to get our ballpoint pen letters. I have that process where machines actually have written door hangers to drop on the doorknob. But even if it's just a Post-it note that just says, "Hey, shoot me a call. I'm
On the
buying
door.
houses in the area." Yeah, on the door. And I see about, on those, we've seen, I would say, roughly like a 2 to 3% response rate. And I know people who get a deal every 150 to 200 of those that they're dropping, because to be fair, they're targeting the most distressed. They're not just doing generic distress then. They're doing that extra effort for those ones that are highly distressed.
Yeah. I'm going to give you two tips that I've used. It's the neighbors campaign. So if somebody has a vacant, ugly property, they want to make sure that somebody buys this house and renovate it so the house values goes up. So one of the tasks for the drivers, if they see a neighbor outside, to go and approach the neighbor and ask them, listen, I would love to buy this house. I'm sure you want somebody to buy this house. If you can put me in touch with the owner, I would love that. And if you want, you can add an incentive, but usually that's enough. They don't need any extra. And they usually will give you the phone number of the owner, and then you can get into the conversation. Listen, I speak with Joe, your neighbor, the other day. He thought I should give you a call because I'm interested to buy your house. So that's going to be a great tip. And also, for people who's not responding to your mailers, I used to send mailers to the neighbors. With targeting the neighbors. So listen, again, I saw your house next door is vacant. If you can put me in touch with the owner of the property, I would love to buy the property. And you can see a much better response rate, and they can connect you with the owner, and they usually have the contact information. That's been working great for me.
And that's a very natural start to the conversation for the owner then as well. It's better than a cold call. It's like, hey, I've got a reason that this is happening. One thing I'd point out too, similar to that, is you might come across some of these properties that are tenant occupied. Well, if a tenant's living in a house that's underkept, like, they're at least maybe a little bit motivated to have a landlord who takes care of it really well. And so you could door knock or reach or directly address a tenant and say, hey, if you connect me to your landlord and I buy the house, I'll incentivize you somehow for that. Maybe it's $500. Maybe it's, hey, if I take over the lease, I'll give you a month rent free or something like that. But working through the tenants to get to a landlord that's maybe not keeping up with the property is another great way of getting to somebody.
Awesome.
Great.
So if you speak about mailers, that's again one of the things that I like about you have a return to sender mailers. So can you share with us what does it mean and what's the power of this feature?
Yeah, so our return to sender, we are plugged directly into the API with USPS. So if a piece of mail is marked by them as return to sender, to where it's essentially was marked as undeliverable for some reason to the property, we will automatically, discontinue that mail from being sent again. So most of our members are automatically repeating their mail via our sequences. And so we will stop that, so you don't waste any more marketing, because USPS has said this address is not going to be deliverable moving forward. And so I will say this caveat: USPS is not always batting 100% when it comes to that. So sometimes they might not mark it in our system, but it might still get sent back to the return address. But the main goal of that, it gives you the data point to say, hey, this address is not deliverable. I need to find another way to hunt down this owner. So maybe that means I skip trace them and try to give them a call. Maybe it means I skip trace and try to find another phone or another mailing address to test out with. It just means that that piece of mail is not deliverable, and we're trying to notify you as soon as we do that that you need to find another way to get a hold of the owner.
Awesome.
I also appreciate the customer support shout out there by who, somebody on your Facebook groups. I'll make sure the team sees that one.
It's Roy. DealMachine best customer support, and again, they are very responsive. They're almost on top of things. Every time you have any questions, they they will solve it for you. And if not, they will get back to you in a very timely fashion. And again, it's truly appreciated. So
I can vouch. I can vouch for the customer support of DealMachine. So as well, every time I had something, quick response, very nice. They get shit done. So that's always good and fast. So that's good.
Yes.
We appreciate it. The last number I looked at was an average response time, I think, of like 112 seconds was our average response time to support requests.
Got it. So we have a few more questions about mailers. Again, I think it's pretty straightforward, but I want you to address it as well. What is the sequence that you recommend after the first mailer with a picture? Do you have any sequence that you see works better than others, or as long as you mail it, you're good?
I lean towards the as long as you mail it, you're good side of that equation. Like the repetition is the factor that we see influence ROI long term versus having that magic mail piece that is just better than everyone else. The reality is I don't see that make as big of a difference. I do think to that point, just varying the mail size and the mail type is more important. So our smaller postcard, our bigger postcard, and then the ballpoint pen letter, that variance, some people might react to those a little bit differently. And so that's what I would test out more so than worrying about the picture versus not the picture or something like that. And to answer the question entirely too, it is customizable entirely on our members side. So the sequence can be built to do whatever you want to test so that you can iterate over time.
Yeah. Just staying top of mind is the main key. So.
Yeah, I think repetition is the key. Something that we've tested it, when you put a picture of yourself on the mailer, the response rate goes higher because there is a persona on the other side. They see that there's a human being. It's not like somebody who target everyone. So we tested it, one without a picture of the investor and one with, and the one with the pictures definitely got a better response rate.
Yep.
Something that go ahead.
I was just a small other tidbit of some small trends on direct mail recently. Again, repetition matters more than anything, but something, especially in the state of the market that we're seeing, being able to sell the property fast is not a unique value proposition right now. Maybe like super short term, it's unique, like if it's like 7 days, but the market is selling properties quickly. Yes, we're seeing it trend up a little bit, but fast and top dollar is not unique selling propositions right now. High amount of trust is a differentiating factor. High amount of, and being able to know that they're like working with someone that's collaborative with them and working them through it. And so if you're going to think about some small variations on language to try out, worry less about sell fast, get cash, worry more about like telling your story in a way that's like trustworthy and differentiates you on those emotional aspects of dealing with you.
Very important point.
Yeah. Testimonials can be great. Testimonials, we helped Joe sell his vacant property. He lived 1,000 miles away and we're able to buy a property without being there. So something like that, it's great. Something else that I like about the campaigns that once the prospect comes, if it's an absentee owner or not. So you can create specific sequence of mailers with specific language that geared toward landlords as opposed to owner occupied. Tenant doesn't pay on time. Are you tired of tenants leaving a property trash or something like that? Again, can trigger the attention of landlord versus owner occupied. That maybe with owner occupied, the trust issue, you can create a mailer and a sequence geared towards trust versus pain point for the landlord, for example.
Yeah, I think the more data you have, the more you understand about the property owner, then you can message accordingly. Is going to get a higher response rate. So, like you said, even dropping the neighbor's name, if they understand, if you had that conversation, or if they're a landlord, if these different things about the property or the owner, all those things will add up to a higher response.
And that's again regarding this again. How often do you update your database as far as sold dates, so we don't mail to properties that already been sold? And that it's up to date.
Yep, it's a weekly update for our database. We sync weekly with the counties across the country. Now, some counties themselves are slow to update their digital records, and so we sync as frequently as we can. But sometimes there's some out of date stuff, obviously, just because data at that scale is always going to have some gaps. But we're updating as free once a week right now.
Which day of the week?
Typically, it's Monday.
Monday.
It could be a Tuesday occasionally, but typically it's a Monday.
Got it. So send your mailers on Wednesdays, guys. So that's a good tip. So, and usually how long it takes for the mailers to hit the
you guys might have experienced this too, but USPS has greatly reduced the delivery increased the delivery the time for delivery over the last year and a half.
They did not decrease.
It's up it used to be we would see like 3 to 5 days for our ballpoints and like 5 to 7 for our postcards. I think we're seeing that go up by 25 to 35% or so right now, just because USPS is slowing down. So I would say roughly 10 days is a good estimate. But it has some variance in there for sure.
Awesome.
George, I would like to talk go back a bit about the hiring of the drivers, okay? Because again, we, from our experience and experience also of other people we work with and our students, hiring a driver can be difficult, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not always easy getting quickly your driver. It's not interviewing. Can you have some type of recommendation, tips, best practices about, because I think it's also, from your end, you would like people to get drivers as quick as and efficient as possible, which will obviously motivate the use of the app. So from your side, do you see any best practices, any tips, any advices on how to recruit drivers, find them in the best way possible?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and always. And the labor markets in the country are labor. It's a very weird time because there's jobs open and there's people there to work, but it's a weird time. I've seen it more difficult lately than I ever have. The biggest thing I will say is one, you got, especially if you're going hourly, you got to find the right dollar value per hour. Looking at what like a local Uber or Lyft driver makes in the market that you're in is a good way to go about that. You could also gauge what a local Amazon driver is making. So just having that data up front is valuable. Secondarily, just reposting your job ads as frequently as you can, looking at Facebook groups that are local to your market, looking at obviously Craigslist and then Indeed to post job ads. And so repetition of posting that job ad consistently is a really important element. I think it's also important to try to always view recruitment as a never done effort. Having drivers on hand and drivers on deck ready to go is really important and valuable. And so never feel like it's done, because you might get one or two that are active and something unfortunate might happen. They might slow down. And so exactly. And so having a few extra on hand will be really valuable as well. And so just don't stop just because you get one. Try to keep going to where you have a few to make sure you're reliable. Additionally to that point, we do have a whole driver recruitment page and training funnel. And so offloading as much of that as a proof point that someone's really interested and willing to go through those efforts by having them go to that sign up page, log in, and start driving, so that you're not spending time with somebody each individual step of the way until they're actually proving that they're able to go to the full extent of using the app and adding in properties is a really way to just save yourself time before you spend like time interviewing and talking to each of these drivers over and over again. So repetition, using that training portal, and then consistent touch points with the drivers are the most important things to finding and activating a driver to a really consistent employee.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Thank you so much. And the hourly rates, right? Finding, because what can happen is that you think you're paying enough, but at the end of the day, you'll find out after nobody is applying that you're paying too little, right? So also understanding, like you mentioned, the current budget that people are getting paid hourly, that's also crucial as well. Thank you so much.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I will add retention. It's super key. Once you find the good driver, take care of them, pay them up, give them bonuses of attendance, of hitting their numbers, because probably the hardest part of this business in general is finding good people that's reliable and trustworthy. So once you find the one, just do whatever you can to keep them happy, to stay long term.
I think between all the masterminds I attend, between all the customers I talk to, talent recruitment, not just drivers, but across the whole company, it is always the biggest challenge. 100%. Everyone 100%. Figures out marketing to where it's profitable. They figure out how to personally talk to a deal. They figure out their buyers list. Some are better at it than others, but by far, all of them struggle, no matter how good they are, at finding good people consistently. And so 100% agree. If you find someone good, just don't let them get away.
Yeah. And that A player right there too, incentivize them to send referrals, like try to turn them into somebody who's going to recruit for you. And they probably know other people who, are on that level. A lot of times, you'll find, sharp people hanging out together like that. So definitely, do all you can to be able to nurture that individual and incentivize them to open up their network to you as well.
Got it. So I want to touch about the KPI, again, more like broad KPIs. I think we mentioned that, again, understanding that it varies and there's a lot of factors to consider. But you mentioned probably as far as response rate is between 0.8 to 1.5 on the meters. What do you see number of leads per deal in general, understanding that phone skills, again, it's a huge factor. Sure. In that, but what do you see compared to other maybe strategies?
Yep. Yeah. With driving for dollars in particular, your ratio of leads to deal is going to be more favorable, obviously, like we said, because it's a niche list. The other big variable, in addition to just personal skills, is going to be the dollar value of the properties that you're looking at. The higher dollar value is probably going to take more leads to get a deal. To give you guys a rough range, if you're looking at areas of the Midwest, maybe $100,000 to $200,000 properties, maybe up to $250,000, you're probably somewhere between 500 and 1,000 properties per deal. Maybe a little bit less sometimes. I got my first couple of deals in the first 300 properties I added to DealMachine. That was a few years ago. I think we are seeing a tighter market right now. But roughly 500 to 1,000 right now is a good range to look at one to maybe a second deal a month to look at. And so I think that the best way to look at it is if you can say, I want to get a deal every month, add 1,000 properties per deal that you want is a really good way to approach that. So you're very likely to get a deal as they go through the marketing cycle. Again, like you might add those 1,000 in January, the deal might be 6 months down the road, because they need repetition in marketing and they need timing to hit. It's not going to just happen the month that you add them, but that would be the cadence I would try to follow. In some really, really high end markets, like if you're looking California, where you're looking at $700,000-$800,000 plus homes, you could see over 1,000 as well. Those are going to be those higher end markets. If you're going virtually, I would probably not target those markets. I might target, unless you want to niche down and focus in that type of market for other purposes. Driving for dollars, the lead channel, I would focus elsewhere, like the St. Louis's, Indianapolis's, Kansas City's, Midwestern cities with a lot of properties under 300,000. I think is really good areas to do driving for dollars.
Awesome.
Josh, can you tell us a bit about what, when somebody wants, let's say, you want to set up a system, you want to hide the driving. Okay, you got a driver, you got a market. How can he better understand which areas are better for driving for dollars and which are less? There is any characteristics, anything that one should look at, identifying areas which might be more potential than others?
Sure. Yeah. And it's one of those things, obviously knowing your own market is really critical. I would say that using the average value of the homes in the area is a really good initial metric. Focusing on things like under 50, under 75,000, deals are just hard to make work in those areas. Like you might come to a street where every single house
Correct.
looks like they could be added. Chances are that you don't necessarily like, you might want to add those properties maybe occasionally, but chances are if you're just focusing there, you're finding deals that other people don't want, and you might make a few $1,000s per deal, but you're not going to get the size of the deals that you really need to make it worthwhile. And so I might target those properties between $100,000 and a $300,000 ARV in your market. Secondarily, looking at the markets, the areas of the market that have cash transactions and investor activity would be the other thing to look at in particular. The interesting part about the cash transactions though right now is we're seeing a lot of retail buyers come in and buy cash now, which used to be more rare. And so just looking at raw cash purchase data isn't as valuable as it used to be, or at least it needs to be looked through a more critical lens, because regular buyers are buying with cash more than we've ever seen. And so looking at specifically investor activity, properties, flip activity in particular, is a really good way to try to get into those areas that are best for driving for dollars.
Yeah, and you can do it with listors. So you just add the absentee owner cash transaction versus owner occupied, so you know who is retail and who is absentee. And the other piece was, I forgot, but never mind. So all right, so I think KPI, we got it. So what else? I forgot. Yoav, help me out here.
You had something, but you forgot. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the drivers, talking about the neighborhoods, we're talking about the KPIs. Just going through, coming from the eyes of somebody who wants today to give it a go and give it a shot, right? What's the, we spoke about those tips, right? Getting the drivers, some tips. How do you advise somebody who wants to start driving for dollars? I mean, tomorrow, what's the actions he needs to, how does he understand what he needs to do?
Sure. So assuming we already know like the market that you're trying to drive for dollars in, which given that you guys, maybe a lot of these guys are virtual in the room today that haven't selected a market yet. Again, kind of like I said, I think those Midwestern cities under $300,000 average property values, or not much over that, are good areas to drive. If you're in a virtual environment and you can choose anywhere, try to look for those types of markets to target. I think the biggest thing is, once you know the area, if you're going to drive physically, you're going to have to find a driver, obviously. And so maybe start marketing in those areas to try to find a driver. Really, ahead of that is, again, step one is budgeting for it and understanding like what is the actual budget that you've got to put towards this. If it's realistically, if you're looking at, hey, I've got less than $1,000 a month to put towards this whole effort, you might want to start out virtually driving for dollars. Maybe you can pay for a driver, but you're limited on the number of hours that you could give somebody to actually go driving. And so if you're under that, maybe you start virtual. And we've got a Chrome plugin. I know we've talked a little about this, but right in Google Maps, you just click down a street, you tap on the property, and within one click, you can add the property, and based off the photo, you can add the property into your DealMachine account and then start marketing to it or doing whatever you want to with it. And so if you're in that budget range and virtual makes the most sense, that's what I would start with. Choose the area and then just hit the roads and start driving with DealMachine virtually. If you or not, I mean, I'd love for you guys to use DealMachine. Realistically, if DealMachine doesn't make sense, you could do it all manually. It's just going to take you guys a lot more time.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to go physical driver, you got to get the driver. So once the driver's in the field, it's a matter of just giving them some direction to here's the areas to drive. As long as you have the DealMachine Pro level, you're able to track their routes and see where they've driven, the properties they add per drive, and the time that they're actually driving. So DealMachine becomes their time card essentially as well, because they can live track how long they drove, how many miles, how many properties. And so you can get some of those metrics and those KPIs per driver down to make it quite a bit easier. One thing I will say, we've got an elite level customer tier that also includes a really hands-on onboarding and training process. Like the first 90 days, you'll have probably 4 or 5 calls with the person that helps you set up, and then quarterly review calls moving forward to help keep you focused and make sure you and your driver are being successful. And so that's, if you want to get really aggressive out of the gates and you're ready to go, that might be something to take a look at too, just because you get that added support and you can add a higher volume of properties. So I don't know if that's the exact.
Yeah, I mean, that's again a bit of a guideline. If somebody says, okay, all right, I heard it and I want to give it a shot, what's the next step I need to take? I think pretty much you gave us a better understanding. Obviously, questions will come to them as they go, sure, as things are being developed. 100%.
Yeah, and our support's there for that. Our YouTube channel has a ton of content on it, like showing both tutorials on the app as well as strategies on how to go implement and do things. And so I think surrounding yourself with that environment of content that we have, and we also have live trainings that we do. So we show you how to do everything along the way as well. But getting started is, like we said, is getting the driver and tell them to hit the roads in the areas that you want to buy properties is really the key.
Yeah. So I think one thing, again, I want to mention, there's 2 things. So first of all, if you're ready to go, we have a link here that will go and get you a discount. How many discount? 15 or 30 credits, Josh? I forgot. We discussed it the other day.
Yeah, so this one we're actually typically it's going to be $15 in free marketing credits. I know for you guys we're going to boost that up temporarily, and that way if anyone's watching this right now and for the foreseeable we'll look at a couple weeks out, we'll be able to say, hey, you guys will get up to 30 marketing credits for that. 15 marketing credits typically gets you about 100 or so free skip traces, and about 20 or about 25 or so free mailers right within the app. So double those numbers, 200 skip traces, about 50 mailers for free right there. If you guys use that promo code. So we'll wanted to make sure that we give you a special offer for you as well.
And what else? If you, again, first of all, thank you very much. It's great. First of all, it's going to save you money. And if you're not convinced, we invited Josh and Matt to kind of do a demo of the system itself. They're gonna take us inside. We're gonna be over their shoulders. They're gonna show us the tricks and tips on how to actually use the system, so you can get more like a hands-on experience of how to do it. Again, if you are not technical or wants to see it, so it's gonna be November 4th, 8 p.m. Israel time. So we're gonna be a Zoom. We're gonna send you a link. We're gonna add an invitation. It's gonna be via Zoom because we want to make sure they can share the screen. It's gonna be a smaller group. You'll be able to ask questions, and it's gonna be more like technical, just to make
great opportunity.
This system. So we're gonna include a link in one of the comments after the call, so you can register and sign up, and we're going to let you know this week and next week and give you more details. But I think this is a great opportunity for you actually see from the experts, the people who build the platform and dealing with people who use it on everyday basis, how to effectively use this system. And we're telling you, Driving for Dollar list is the best list. You can ask any experienced investor out there. They will all tell you that Driving for Dollar list is probably the most responsive list that you'll ever see, because there is a physical, obvious sign of distress to a property. All the other lists, we think there is a distress. Again, sometimes there is a financial distress, but here with Driving for Dollars, we actually see that there is an issue with the property. So we invite you to be there, and we're gonna share for people, again, just to make sure you attend. For people who show up, again, we're going to send you how to recruit the driver, where to put the ads, how to find the drivers, and we also include, for people who will show up, the process, the policies and procedures for the drivers of what to do, how to take pictures, how to drive systematically, what to add to the system, what not to add to the system, to make sure drivers don't add garbage properties to them, because it's again, especially when you start to track their KPI and you pay them hourly, all of a sudden you see garbage added to the system, and obviously garbage in, garbage out. You're not going to get any good deals and leads. Any other things, guys, before we let you go?
No, if you guys have questions, I mean, our emails are Josh and Matt at DealMachine.com. And so let us know if we can be helpful. Again, our customer support's there to answer questions. I will say, like, I've got some guys on my team in particular that help people evaluate if they want that route I mentioned, that elite route where you get that hands-on support, and if you're trying to get like 2-3+ deals a month out of the gates, the elite plan is the one that typically will allow for that. So if you guys want like a one-to-one conversation, if that's the type of goals that you guys have, I'd be happy to make sure I or someone on my team has a one-to-one conversation with you to evaluate that for yourself, and get you guys going.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, Josh and Matt, thank you very, very much for being here and sharing your experience and knowledge about this amazing platform. It's not the last time. If you're going to see you next week or a week or so from today,
Yeah, looking forward to
you
it.
can show us the inside, what's going on inside the system. But we really very thankful and grateful that you stopped by today, took the time out of your busy schedule to be with us today.
Thank you guys. Everyone on the call. I appreciate you guys being here, and hopefully you get something out of it and hunt down some deals.
Yeah.
Awesome.
For sure.
Huge
So make
pleasure.
sure to use the link for you guys too. So that's great.
Awesome. Thank you very much, guys. And we're going to share details about next week so we can sign up, and we're going to see you next week. So thank you very much. And we're going to sign off now.
Thanks guys.
Everybody.